Hello everybody. It's a nice opportunity just to reflect a little bit about our diocesan pilgrimage. Bishop Murphy was the bishop who started it in 1951, and a few years ago I had to prepare a paper for the Diocesan History Day, so I went to the curial offices and looked to see if there was any documentary evidence, and he'd written a letter in the January of 1951 inviting the deans and the vicar general to a meeting in St Werburgh's, Chester. He decided we should have a pilgrimage to Lourdes, and so that September the first pilgrimage from the diocese went, and he led it, and Father Harry Nixon was the first director. It was obviously a success because they just carried on organising pilgrimages each year, and eventually Father Carroll took over as director, and then he was followed by Jack Lynch briefly, and then Paddy Healy. They had all sorts of adventures. It's very easy for us today. We jump on a plane and fly from Manchester or from Liverpool direct to Lourdes. In those days, everything was done on the train, and we used to charter a train from British Railways, as it was then, and they'd set off from Birkenhead, Woodside, and some would go from Stockport, and they'd meet up at Crewe and carry on down to Folkestone. And there was always the problem going through the different railway regions, particularly around London, and they had to go all the way around London and go on to Southern region, which had different engines, and it took about 8 hours to get to Folkestone. And then everybody had to be offloaded off the train onto the ferry, and then offloaded off the ferry onto the French train, and off you'd go again. There was one year, I think it was in 1958, where the train on the English side going through Kent came to a halt because of a severe storm, and the driver actually couldn't see where he was going, so intense was the rain, so they had to pull the train up and stop. Of course there were steam engines, so they were running out of water despite the rain, and people in the nearby village put hoses together to fill the engine up with water for the steam. And they also brought pots of tea and sandwiches to the pilgrims. What a difference now when you can, as I say, you jump on a plane and be there in about 2.5 hours. More recently, of course, we've used coaches to get to Calais, and then use the TGV train, which have been much quicker and much more comfortable. But of course you lose certain camaraderie flying, and the great thing about the train was you could walk up and down the train and meet old pilgrims and new pilgrims and meet friends, and it did get together a sense of the travelling people of God, the wandering people of God. We also remember when we used to brew tea on the train. We had great old boilers brewing tea to sell up and down the train, or on the way back stopping at Bordeaux station and going into the station buffet for chips. And quite often, if the train wasn't to stop long enough, we'd arrange for somebody to be ill at one end of the train and to be carried along the platform solemnly along Bordeaux station, so that those who were deputed to go and get chips had enough time to get over and make their purchases. It was all good fun, and we managed it. And I suppose one of the great miracles of Lourdes was that we got there and we got back, and the journey was okay. I remember one year we were on the TGV train coming back, and we pulled into Lille station in the north of France, and the platform manager came up and looked up at the garden and said, "Who are you?" And the guy said, "We're a pilgrimage train." He said, "Well, where have you come from?" He says, we've come from Lourdes. And he looked at he said, well, you're not on my list. He said, where are you going? I said, we're going to Calais. He said, oh, bon voyage. Then there was one year, one of the coaches was late arriving, and I said to the station master at Calais, this was on the way out, I said, he said to me, are you ready to go? So I said, no. He said, why not? I said, because we're missing a coach. He said, well, where is it? I said, I don't know. He said, well, is it in Calais? I said, oh, I don't think so. He said, is it in the Channel? I said, it might be. Or he said, or is it still in England? I said, no. I said, I think it's actually set out from Dover. So he just turned to his mate. He said, well, we better go and have a coffee. And he looked at me and said, when you're ready, let me know. And we always seemed to manage to make up the time, didn't we? Whenever the train was late leaving, it was always made up time. Another great changes in Lourdes, of course, over the 70 years nearly now, has been the hospitals. I can remember first going to Lourdes with Salford Diocese when I was at school in Manchester, and the sick were housed in the old asile. I mean, you talk about social distancing now. The beds were crammed next to each other. If anybody had any contagious disease, the whole ward would have got it in next to no time. And if people were uncomfortable, they were told to offer it up. But nowadays, they're in a nice, reasonably modern hospital in 2 bedrooms, 2-bedded wards, or 4-bedded now, aren't they, most of them? And it's a lot more of a relaxed regime than it used to be. We can remember the old matrons like Maggie Murphy ordering nurses around and always using their surnames, and there was no social niceties with Maggie, God rest her, but we managed and we kept going. We had some great doctors. I remember only recently Sean Blaney died, and he used to come with Brian Hawes and Dr. Mooney. They came for years, and then of course Phil Allen took over, and John Mackay's there now, and lots of other doctors. We've always been very well served by our pilgrimage doctors, and they've always given great care to the patients, and we've always brought patients in various, some of the people who've come have really been ill, and they've always been well looked after, and we have to be very grateful for that. Lourdes itself has changed. I mean, yeah, I say when I first went, the highlight for the sick pilgrim was getting out of the hospital to go and sit in front of the grotto, and quite often they were wheeled down to the grotto after breakfast, and masses would be going on, and then when masses were finished, they had the choice of either staying where they were or being wheeled down to the baths, and then from there they went back to the hospital for what was lovingly called lunch. I mean, the food wasn't great at all. And then in the afternoon, they would go back down to the grotto or to the baths, and then they would be wheeled round into the Rosary Square for the Blessed Sacrament procession, and then they'd go back to the hospital, and that was that. There was no going out at night, and there certainly wouldn't be seen anywhere near a torchlight procession. But sometimes a group of us would go round the wards, our wards, and sing the hymns and say the rosary with candles, so it looked like a little mini torchlight procession. And as years went on, things developed, and we used to have social evenings, and one of the great images of Lourdes, of course, is Bishop Gray singing the Rosa Tralee for all the sick people. He had a good singing voice, did Joe. And Canon Healy was the director when Bishop Joe celebrated his Golden Jubilee, and we got Joe to preside at the International Mass on the Sunday, and Joe thought he was Pope for the day. He thought it was marvellous. And of course, when he arrived at the sanctuary, all the Shrewsbury pilgrims started clapping, which is not a very English thing to do. And Father Deschat, the choir master, told them all to shut up in Italian, because he presumed it was Italians who were clapping and not the English. We also had Bishop Noble to celebrate the International Mass for his Golden Jubilee, and he really enjoyed it. He admitted he enjoyed it anyway. He was saying it was like being Pope for the day. What other things can I tell you about our pilgrimage to Lourdes? Probably a lot of things are best left unsaid, because we always used to say what happens in Lourdes stays in Lourdes. There's all sorts of romances, of course, found in Lourdes. We've had a few Lourdes weddings over the years, and happily they've stayed together, and we still see them from time to time. One of the big developments over the last 40 years really has been the development of the youth aspect of the pilgrimage. I can remember in, I think it was 1979, myself and Peter Burke and John Joyce brought a coach load from the diocese to Lourdes to join the diocesan pilgrimage. How's this for a journey? We left St Anthony's, Wythenshawe at midnight. We drove down to Southampton, got on the ferry to Le Havre, and then got down from Le Havre, drove down from Le Havre to Lourdes, arriving at something like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we've done 2 nights travelling, a day on the boat and another half day. At Le Havre, the coach driver was arrested because what had happened was we got a coach from Manchester to Southampton and then walked onto the boat, and the coach went off somewhere else, and the travel agent sent his own coach to Le Havre to pick us up, which at the time it was illegal for English coaches to pick up people in France. Anyway, Peter Burke went and pleaded with the mayor of Le Havre, and we set off. But you're in the end of July and it's as hot as hell. So we arrive in Lourdes in time for the opening mass at 3 o'clock on the prairie. Bishop Grazer had been taken ill, so didn't come. So we always remember listening to Bishop Holland of Salford preaching on the prairie in the heat of the day about abortion and contraception. All these poor sick people who were not really prone to that sort of thing. Anyway, that's one memory. But that, along with Jack Roper, who was parish priest in Telford at the time, he brought a group that same year from BRJ College, as it was then. And that was really the beginning of the Shrewsbury Youth, and it's grown and ups and downs over the years, but we have a great representation of young people coming to Lourdes from all over the diocese. And this is replicated in other dioceses too, and the English pilgrimages have got this great reputation of bringing lots of young people to Lourdes, and it's very impressive for other people. And it's surprising the number of French priests and Italian priests who just come to us and say, how do you do it? And they just say, well, we give them a good rewarding time. They work hard, they pray hard, and by God, they play hard at night, but they enjoy it, and they're shattered when they get home. But it's something that they cherish and that they keep in their hearts for many years. And you know, we built up a good cohort of helpers who first came to Lourdes as young people and who carried on coming. They don't all carry on coming, that doesn't matter, but it's all a part of their spiritual journey, and whatever they do and whatever they get up to, they'll always cherish those days they've had in Lourdes, days of prayer, days of playing, and days of working hard. And people like Jack Roper, who eventually was the parish priest of the cathedral, Peter Robertson and Pat Monroe have always brought young people to Lourdes, and it's been good to see. One innovation we had was dropping the English travel agents, and that was in 1995-96 when Canon Healy was the director, and we were using a firm in Liverpool who put a bid in for the pilgrimage, or a price I should say, and it was extortion, it was crazy. So Paddy says to me, what shall we do? I said, well, ask them just to look at it again. So he did, and they came back with an even higher price. So I said, well, we can't do that. So we got in touch with the people in Birmingham, because they were using a travel agent in Lourdes, Pierre Barrère, and got us in touch with him, and he made the necessary arrangements, and we got the prices off him. And I can always remember sitting in St Werburgh's Presbytery in Chester, where I was parish priest at the time, and there was myself and Paddy and Don McDermott and Mary McDermott and Ted Malone, and we were pricing up the pilgrimage, and our price worked out at just over £100 cheaper than the previous year, and we were trying to work out what we'd missed out, and we hadn't. So of course we published the prices, and we had one of the biggest pilgrimages for a long time because it was cheaper again. And we're still using Mr Barrère for the hotels, and Joe Walsh does the travel side of things. But I mean, at one point I had my own atoll license, because I think it was the year 2000, we overbooked the train, and I said to Mr Barrère, I said, can you get another train for us? He said, no. He said, why don't you use a plane? So we got a plane, and we got reported to the trading standards for running a plane without an atoll license. So the British travel agents thought that would be the end of us, and that we'd have to go to one of them, but instead I got an atoll license, which really naffed them off, because one year, of course, I did Salfords as well, and under our license, so that was fun, because we got back-to-back flights, which saved empty legs, and it saved a lot of money, and basically we found the travel agents out, and we knew how they made money and how we stopped them. So it created a nice little bit of competition. Of course, some travel agents didn't speak to me for years, but then they had to, because I became chairman of the National Conference of Pilgrimage Directors, and that was good fun. I got to know lots of people in Lourdes, and made some good friends. That was the great thing about the pilgrimage. You made lots of friends, and you made a few enemies as well along the way. But nevertheless, we had good times, and people still have good times, and long may it continue. We're looking forward now to will be the 70th anniversary of our first pilgrimage in 2021. I hope to be there, and I hope you will be too.